into the IAS world system, and it will spit out a value 2012 base year cost. The problem is, what John said, it's sold for more than the base year. So the school districts, it's low hanging fruit. For the last 20 years, it has been low hanging fruit for the school districts to take that and look for current market.
Okay, if we go to the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2, I'm going to do a real quick review. There's only one sentence of interest. This is the judge's opinion that was filed November 14th, 2 Fridays ago, and is upfront number 1 finding, and I quote, Allegheny County failed to administer the property tax assessment appeal system. In a just and impartial manner. Well, that's his number 1 finding in his judicial opinion. Then if we go to page 4, the last sentence in that paragraph that I boxed, and before I read it, you will hear the word evidence or see the word evidence there. The evidence was what Mr. Katina already referenced, which is the computer program that the county developed. From this evidence, there could be no doubt that Allegheny County's Office of Property Assessment had been cooking the books on common level ratio data submitted to state government at STEP. I will make one more comment before we leave this page. Mr. Sully put up in his first graphic beginning with 2016. 2016 is when they developed a second part of the program to supercharge the inflation. That's why it was up in the 80s instead of down in the 70s. If we go to page 11, towards the bottom, this is one of the documents I was asked to bring. It's part of, yes, that's 11. If you look at the bottom of the page, I have a box there, and this answers the question, partially answers the question of why. It was thought that in order to fulfill Mr. Fitzgerald's directive of no reassessment, you had to stay out of a revaluation of assessment territory, which you see in the box was keeping the assessments above 85%. So that's what they did. They cheated to keep it above 85% in order to avoid a revaluation. The fact of the matter is 85% common level ratio is not the criteria anyone uses to determine whether there's a revaluation. The criteria is called coefficient of dispersion, but because we have ignorance rather than intelligence overseeing the system, they didn't know that.
So this was hard coded into the sequel program then?
Yes, it was.
Who hard coded it into the sequel program? And by whose direction was it hard coded in?
If we go to page 15. And I'm asking Dee Hennon, the computer programmer who Pilarski appointed as the chief assessment officer without asking her to perform any chief assessment officer duty except sign off on the official assessment role without reading. Question: was it your idea to have the section 15 written into the overnight program? This is the computer program that was written in 2014 to keep the ratio high. It wasn't just my idea. No, we had a group of people looking at things that we could automate. who was in the group? Answer, the ones that I can recall. I'll skip. Jessica Lehman, that was her maiden name. Her married name is Jessica Garofalo, and she's your director that oversees the operation. And then Mary Beth Snyder and Karen Backus. Karen Backus is employed by D. Hennon. She does computer program, has nothing to do with assessing. That's who you recall was in the discussion in 2014 when section 15 was written. Answer on the next page, yes. Who was in the discussion in 2016 for writing into the program section 4B? Section 4B is where what they did is they released special warranty deeds that had high ratios only. The low ratios, they automatically reported to STEB as invalid sales, even though 90% of them were valid. But the high ratio sales, they reversed that and gave them to their coders. Answer, Jessica, meaning Jessica Garofalo, Karen, meaning my employee, and I. I can't recall whether Mary Beth or not. Going to page 17 towards the bottom. And question at the bottom, line 25. And in updating the SQL program, I give the program number in 2016, to break section 4 into 4A and B. Do you recall the discussions that you had at that time? Only generally.
Yes.
And those discussions were with fellow employees Garofalo, Snyder, and Backus. I don't recall Snyder's role, definitely Backus and Garofalo. Was this change to break section 4 into A and B requested by anyone? Yes. Who requested it? Jessica Garofalo. Did she say why she was requesting it? Yes. Will you share what she wanted to change? She said in her work doing sale validation, she felt that some of the special warranty deeds looked to her to be valid, and she would like the opportunity to manually check a portion of them. So if we go backwards, page 13, Jessica Garofalo at the time was the operations manager, not the director who was promoted this year. And this is a deed that I examined Jessica Garofalo on in her deposition. You see it's a deed from letters to letters. This is a mother and father and aunt and uncle deeding the auto body business to the son, Nicholas. Whenever you see a deed from one family member to another family member under the regulations of state government, it has to be disqualified, not as a valid deed. Jessica Garofalo was staring at their last names when she coded it because they're on the computer system, name of buyer, name of seller. This happened to have a ratio of the property of over 100%. She coded this as a valid sale. So that's who is running your assessing department right now. If we go back one more page to page 12, when I was in high school and we were getting ready for a test, we used to have cheat sheets. We put on an index cards, answers that we weren't sure we could remember for questions the teacher said we'd have on our exam. Well, I call page 12 the cheating sheet. This is a sheet that was given to the manual coders, the ones that Jessica Garofalo said in her earlier testimony, we want to take a look at these deeds that are above 85% ratio. We'll keep on disqualifying the low ratio ones. Well, this sheet says if you're a manual coder who doesn't have any training, doesn't have any idea what a common level ratio is, if you see that the ratio of the deed that you're coding has an assessed value divided by sale price of 85% or higher, then you're to validate it and you don't care if it's between family members or from an estate or a sale by a bank, it's a foreclosure sale. Okay. So if we go to page 43, this is a continuation of Dee Hennon's testimony, the former chief assessment officer. And what I asked her was, in Exhibit 2, maybe we go to page 7, back to page 17 real quick. On the state government website, on page 19, I apologize. On page 19, you download the sales validation and submission operations manual. That's the state guidelines for how to code a sale valid or invalid. And everyone needs to know that who's coding. I will digress and say, when I asked the individual coders if they'd ever seen this, I'd show it to them. The answer was no. But what they had seen, and the way I discovered it, was the cheating sheet. Okay, going back to who Pilarski appointed as the chief assessment officer, computer programmer, if you knew nothing about assessing. And I don't blame her. She is the victim in this. Pilarski should have never done this to an employee. But setting that aside, on page 40, I'm sorry, at the bottom of page 20, I asked Dee Hennon, are you familiar with Exhibit 2? Yes, sir. I've seen this. Going to the top of the next page. Where have you seen this? On STEP's website. Would it be within your job to know this document? No, I don't think so. Question, why not? Answer, because I don't validate sales. Well, setting aside the fact that you don't validate sales, are you saying implicitly, so you don't supervise anyone who validates sales? Answer, that's correct. So what we have here is a situation where the one who is in charge doesn't do, not only does she not know, and she was picked as a person who was known not to know, but although she took educational programs from state government, she never taught the programs or distributed the materials. And I think there's a good reason. You don't want to distribute the materials that tell you how to do it right if you're distributing a cheating sheet that tells you how to do it wrong. Okay, moving on to page 22. This is the criteria that the council wrote for who a chief assessment officer should be. And I'm bringing this up simply because the new chief assessment officer that was announced in the newspaper, I know very well. He is a very competent assessor who I know well because he is a commercial hearing officer, and I've appeared before him, and he and I can talk appraisal back and forth. But there's a problem with this appointment. If you go down to the 5th line, the chief assessment officer at the 4th line shall have had a minimum of 10 years of progressively responsible professional experience in the management of property valuation. He has never done this before. He has never managed an assessor. He doesn't know anything about coding, and that's who you want. Again, just like I didn't fault Dee Hennon, I'm not going to fault the new chief assessment officer, but I can tell you because people called me about what was going on after council said that they were investigating why we don't have a chief assessment officer. They did a hurry up. Pilarski got on the phone and called a chief assessment officer in another county who was competent to do this. He wasn't hired. Right. Jessica Garfolo called into her office and talked to a very competent appraiser who teaches appraisal and ethics at the Realtors Association. She called back for a second interview.